Hi, welcome. I'm gonna give folks about one more minute just to join in. But we're really excited to have you here for this conversation about MFA programs, about the application process, about researching things, et cetera, et cetera. So, as I mentioned to our panelists, we are going to be a little loose with this conversation. So, as you're thinking about questions, feel free to raise your hand, or if you'd like to, you can enter things into the chat. I do want to let you know it is being recorded for the internet. So, if you want to stay off camera, be on camera. Whatever you would like and you are most comfortable with, I too am most comfortable with. Again, I'll be monitoring the chat for questions, and we'll introduce those as we're moving through. All right. Welcome, everyone. I am Erin Elizabeth Smith. I am a distinguished lecturer and the director of career development here in the English department. So we're excited to have you and to talk about this process. I will love to introduce you to all of our folks. And if our panelists could introduce themselves, note their pronouns, and then talk maybe briefly about your connection to MFA programs generally. Did you go to one? Are you at one? Have you read for one? Whatever iteration you would like. So I'm going to step away and let our panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I can go first. Hi, I'm Shira. I'm a second year MFA in poetry at UT, and I use she, her pronouns.
I am Chris Hebert. I'm the director of the creative writing program here at the University of Tennessee. I teach fiction writing and screenwriting. I also attended an MFA program at the University of Michigan. My pronouns are he, him.
My name is Sandra, but I also go by Lola. I am an international student at UT. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in my second year of my MFA.
Hi, my name is Jacob Lietz. I'm a first year MFA here at UT. My pronouns are he, him.
I guess that's me. I'm Raye Hendrix. I use she and they pronouns. I'm a lecturer here at UT, and I got my MFA at the University of Texas at Austin.
Welcome, everybody. So we're going to start with just kind of a very simple question, which is, why get an MFA? What is an MFA, and why should one seek one out in the greater world?
Fame and glory.
I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have laughed. So, no, yes, I agree. Fame and glory is a major one, definitely. I'm curious.
Somewhere.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Why did you writers go for an MFA?
It's the way I had it always put to me by professors who had also gone and gotten MFAs was that MFAs, depending on where you go, and I'm sure we'll talk about funding at some point here, but depending on where you go, if like UT, you can go to a place that has great funding, tuition waivers and stipends included, then basically you're going to get time to work on a piece of fiction or a collection of poetry that normally graduating, from undergraduate, immediately you go into the job field and you lose a lot of time that you would spend working on a collection or a significant piece of work. And so whenever I would talk to professors and I would say, I'm thinking about doing an MFA because I hear a lot of people talk about it, they'd say, well, go if you have something that like you think you can work on and create, because all it's going to do is just give you time to make that thing. And if you're going to, just party, not great. Which I had a few other professors say that that's why they went to MFAs, and then I quickly found other professors to seek advice from. but yeah, just it affords you time is how I have always thought of it.
I think the advantage, at least for me, is finding a really strong and supportive community. I know some of MFAs have the reputation of um, competition and kind of people being at each other's throats and like competing for opportunities, but that's really not how my time here has been. The community I found here has been really supportive and uplifting, and it's a really, great experience to be surrounded by writers and learn from them all the time. So that's why I sought this out, and I think it's been giving me what I want. So.
I guess I can just share it because my reason for going was a little bit different so far. I mean, both of these two things that have been mentioned, the community and the time. But I'm someone who I didn't really have a creative writing background before I started an MFA. I knew that I liked to write poetry, and I had like one or two undergrad workshops that sort of encouraged me to keep writing poetry. But I didn't really know where to start with it. So the workshop model was something that was really attractive to me, like actually getting feedback on my poems and, not just, yes, from professors, but also from like a group of my peers. Just the opportunity to have like a lot of eyes constantly on my work, and also to be able to read other people's work and kind of figure out where I fit, what my poetic voice was. So yeah, the workshop was specifically what drew me to an MFA.
These are all great answers, and I think. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to co-sign to all of these. I think they're all great. And I guess as the person here, probably with the longest perspective on this, like an MFA program being the farthest in my rearview mirror, I think all of these things are absolutely the case. I guess, as Jacob says, if like the funding question is one we'll absolutely have to talk about, but provided this isn't something you're going into debt for, like the worst case scenario of an MFA program is it's an opportunity to work on your work and grow as an artist. And as Raye says, find your voice. I think at this stage, it's what a lot of us are trying to do, is like, who I'm interested in writing, but I don't know what I have to say and I don't know how to say it. And it's, you're giving yourself time to find it. And as Shira says, like that piece is not to be underestimated. Like for a lot of us who come out of these programs, arguably the most important thing we take away from us is the community of writers that we found there, who are our writers for life. Those people that I graduated with back eons ago are still my readers. They're still the people I send my manuscripts today. They're still the very first people I go to. And we sort of grow together as writers. We support each other as writers. We we'll watch each other's successes as writers. We support each other through failures as writers. It's like that community aspect is really huge.
Yeah, I think that is so important in thinking about the ways in which, I think I definitely, a million years ago was like, I'm going to get an MFA, I'm going to publish a book, I'm going to get famous, I'm going to get the perfect job, and it's like it's going to all align. And I think that like that can be sometimes a dangerous mindset of going into an MFA program if you feel like it is, that there are like it's going to tick off all of the different boxes. And I think thinking about things like as a community forward, as time, as opportunity to hone your craft. I think these are the skills that an MFA is going to absolutely give you in spades. So once you know if you're going to the MFA, you're like, this is it. This is the thing for me. What would be the next step in trying to find the right MFA program to apply to, even?
I can start this one. I think for me, I'm an international student, so there's a whole different process when you are applying and you were not born in the US that I can talk a little bit more about. But for this question, something that was very important for me was diversity. And I know that Ileana Rocha, who is my mentor right now, was teaching at UT, and it was very important for me to see who the faculty were, because these are the people that you are going to be working with. So yeah, that was one of the things that I considered when I started looking for programs.
I'll jump in. Um, I so number one, I didn't want to go into debt. I only applied to, programs that were fully funded and not partial funded, had teaching or some kind of full funding. So I just didn't want to go into debt. So that was my first sort of parameter. But the second thing that I did to try and like pick out programs is I just looked at where some of my favorite poets were teaching. I tried to just do that kind of research, see who had graduated from that program. If they had books out, read those books. I'm a researcher at heart, so I did a lot of research. And it was also particularly important to me as someone who is Southern and writes a lot into Southern identity to be at a Southern school or a school with Southern professors who would kind of understand where I was coming from and get some of the cultural references that I was making. So those were my sort of trifecta of programs.
Yeah, just to go off that again, funding was where I started. It seems like I think some people might think that's a shallow place to start, but when you're sort of looking at the idea of like, okay, well, I can go into, tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt or not go into any debt at all, that's not at all a shallow thing. And you should not feel as if you should go into debt for it. So that was just the first thing I did. I just Googled like, what are some fully funded MFA programs? And I got to look at them and I realized that there are some that have teaching like UT, you teach and work in the writing center and that's how your funding works. Other places said, yeah, you don't have to teach your first year, but you teach, 4 classes your second year. And so they're all split up differently, and because there's something that the schools have you do to earn that funding. But yeah, the internet's your friend for that. There's a lot of great lists, a lot of the websites. UT is right now in the process of redoing their English website and the MFA website. And even today, I was like helping the people write that to make it as clear as possible. Like, hey, here's what you do. It's funded. You get a stipend. Here's what that entails. Doing research is by far like it's your best friend to find out what are you getting into, where do you go, what schools are going to offer you money. Because if schools seem to be a bit shady about what they give you, it's probably a bad sign that they're not going to give you much or anything at all, and you got to do some groveling for it. So yeah, there's plenty of schools out there who offer funding. It's not like there's only a select 5. There's lots. So you can pick those.
Yeah, and I just wanted to butt in to just like provide some larger context. I think Jacob just did a lot of it, but I realized we were tossing around funding a lot and not really defining what we're talking about. And thanks, Jacob, by the way, for the help with the MFA program stuff. There are a lot of different ways that MFA programs approach funding. So from one extreme, you're just like kind of like with college and with a lot of things, you're paying your own way. You're paying for tuition, you're paying to house yourself. And there is a spectrum where at the complete opposite extreme, they are covering your tuition, they are paying you a stipend to cover your living expenses. And sometimes those stipends are very generous, sometimes they're enough to get by. And then there are also some programs that are in between where sometimes they will offer maybe a tuition waiver, but not stipend to cover your living expenses. There are also some programs where there is competitive funding, which means some students will get covered in some combination of those things and other students won't. And that is also a tricky scenario. Like you can feel good sometimes when you're, the students who do manage to get the funding, and it's all very competitive. It's often based on just like the strength of your portfolio and how much they want you for any number of reasons. But it's also complicated because there can be a very different sort of vibe in a program like that. I think part of what makes programs like ours, like at least I hope ours, is a non-competitive and a program where people get along. It's partly because of the size, which is another factor to talk about in a minute, but it's also because there is not fighting over scarce resources. And there's not a sense of like some people have some things and other people don't have things. So there are disadvantages to being in programs where some people get funding and some people don't. And again, like in this context, we were joking earlier about, if you can go somewhere for free, the worst case scenario is you get to spend time in your writing. But it is serious, because one thing you have to know about MFA programs is that, unlike some graduate programs, it's not really a pre-professional program. It is not a degree that really helps you concretely get a job. It may help you get a job. Like, we have grad students who, it helps them get jobs in marketing and publicity and communications and lots of stuff like that. But it's not like a one-to-one connection like it is with like nursing program or teaching or things like that. So it's not like a pre-professional degree certificate. So it's why you will often hear professors say, you really want a program where you're not going into debt for this, because it's the kind of debt that you won't necessarily get out the back end. It's not necessarily going to help you get a raise or get a certain kind of job. So ideally, you want to really aim for a program where you are not having to pay to go there. So just to add to what Raye and Jacob have said, I think like another factor to think about where you want to go is the size of the program. There are really big programs, there are really small programs. And I think there's an argument to be made one way or the other. Some people really want a big program with a huge, like, they're surrounded with students and like lots of people to interact with, and some people would prefer a small program, which is more intimate. Like, I went to a more of a mid-sized program. UT is a pretty small program. And the other thing, to sort of build on what Raye was saying, I think there are also arguments one way or the other to go about geography too. Like, sometimes there's an argument to be made to, like, it's a benefit to get out of your comfort zone and like go to some place you've never been before, where you're going to be uncomfortable. And but there's also an argument to be made to go somewhere where you feel like people are going to understand where you're coming from and what your voice is like. With any of these issues, you can approach it from a lot of different angles. But I think those are really the four factors, just like size of program, who teaches there, funding, and the geography.
Yeah, I agree with that list too. And as somebody who I did a very small program for my MFA and a really much larger program for my PhD, and there are pluses and minuses for both. So, and I think that's like, thinking about how, how many people that you want to be working with, and how much time that sometimes can take out of especially when you have a smaller staff of creative writers too. Yeah. Would anybody else like to chime in on this?
I think everyone covered most of the things, but there are like Facebook groups and groups online that you can like chat with other people who are kind of going through the same thing, applying for MFAs, share information. I know there's MFA draft. I was never personally on it, which honestly, like, if you're someone who gets easily stressed out, don't do it. But if you just like are also, you like want to know, kind of the general vibe of other people. Yeah, I was not on it. I think Lolo maybe was, so
Yeah, I can explain a little bit. So the MFA draft group is created every year, and in there, like, people talk about their programs and how much stipend they get, who is the faculty there, and there are like people who are already in MFA programs, and you can also get into the group if you are trying to get into an MFA program. And to be honest, for international students, it is a really important resource because we don't get, like, me being from Mexico, I didn't know what programs were prestigious and which programs weren't. So that's the kind of group where you can know these things. You can know about MFAs that have first free rounds. There's other people applying. There's people that will maybe charge you some amount of money to like read your work and give you some feedback. So it is a helpful page, but it can be very stressing because once people start getting accepted, they start posting about it, and if you haven't heard anything, that's where it can get a little bit tricky. So if what you're looking for is information, it's probably better if you just go into the MFA group when you are applying and then leave the group. But if you want to know when people are getting like their acceptances or they are getting rejected, that's also a resource for that.
And I do want to note also in terms of thinking about location, think also about the cost of living in that location versus stipends. So we've been talking a little bit about stipends. A $15,000 or $25,000 stipend goes a lot further in some places in the US than it does in others too. So thinking about, will you need to work on top of the work that you're doing? I have friends who've done MFAs in New York, and they're like, yeah, I had a stipend, but I also had to work 40 hours a week in order to afford an apartment. So how much, whereas, if you are going, living in a place that's a lot smaller, a college town, prices are, cost of living is going to be significantly different too. So that might be something to also think about in terms of both place and funding collectively. We've already kind of jumped into some of the funding questions, and I think that's obviously a big one. Is there any other kind of advice when it comes to thinking about funding or applications, or what to kind of think about when you're researching, or perhaps once you've got accepted somewhere?
I do want to mention that you have to pay for your applications. You can sometimes get fee waivers, but you have to pay for them, and they are usually more expensive for people who were not born in the US. So I know that I spent more money applying to schools than maybe some of my peers just because I was not born in the US. So it is important to have some kind of budget when you are applying. Also, if you are an international student, you will have to take the TOEFL, and that's also expensive. So before I applied to an MFA, I did have to save some money in order to apply.
Yeah, the application cost is a great point. I wish that I didn't have the extra fees for being international, but I applied to several schools where you had to take like GRE. And so the GRE is also kind of expensive. I know for me, I kind of lived in the middle of nowhere when I was applying, so I had to drive like 2 hours in addition to paying for the GRE to take it. So that was gas, and then finding like a place to like stay for the night. So thinking about the upfront cost is really important too. And then Erin, you mentioned something that made me think of the cost of living thing. One thing that I was told, because Austin, where I did my MFA, is not a cheap place to live. And one of the things that I was told by my advisor when I was applying is, in that factor, like, I was kind of lucky in that I was moving with a spouse, and so we already kind of knew we were going to have a dual income. She told everyone who was in our group, decide now if you're willing to have a roommate or not, because a lot of these programs, no one else who wasn't already married or had a partner in my program could afford to live in Austin on our stipend alone. So think about like the roommate situation if you're okay with that kind of thing, because most of the time it's going to be a stranger. If you're moving to a new place, probably someone from your program, ideally, but still, that's something to consider. Like if you want to live alone, you might not be able to do that in Austin. And I know that some schools too, like Austin, had a rule that you couldn't have a second job. Couldn't, like we all did, but you definitely couldn't work 40 hours a week with that program. So just a couple just things that came up for me while I was listening. So
yeah, and you really don't, I mean, like sometimes it's unavoidable, but the cost of living issue is like really to be taken seriously, because again, as we started off saying, like a large way, the whole point of the MFA is that it's an opportunity to work on your work and find your voice and find yourself as an artist. And that's really hard to do when you're also working a full-time job. And it's like what really high priority for this is to try to clear the decks as much as humanly possible, so that you can focus on what brings you there, because you only get one chance to do this, and it's really important to get as much out of it as you can. And there's also often at the programs, there's a lot of additional stuff. There are events that are going on, and it's really important to take advantage of those as much as possible, to meet writers that are coming in from out of town, to take part in things that are going on. And the more competition you have for that, the harder it is.
Yeah, these are all excellent points. I want to kind of jump over to the chat because there is a great question about the GRE and asking, is it necessary? And I know that UT doesn't require it, but I'm curious, and I can speak to this a little bit, but how many programs are folks seeing that are requiring the GRE these days?
Yeah, I'll just say I had like my initial list of where I wanted to apply was like I found like 25 schools that I thought these are all really great. I'd love to go here. They're all fully funded. They're all in places I'd love to live. And just the process of like limiting that down like is something like, you should make a huge, doesn't have to be huge. You should make a list of places you want to go, but also have standards. And so a lot of them I would look at what is required. And if they said that, you had to take the GRE, I'm like, I don't really want to take the GRE. I'm just not going to apply to that school. And by the end of it, I still had like 15 schools that I really liked that didn't require that test. And so that might be, so I didn't encounter a school that asked for a GRE. And if that's something that you really want to take because there's a school that you really love, then that might be your answer for it. But if you're worried, is this something I have to take? Do I have to start worrying about it now? I never encountered it in like the 20 schools that I initially had. And even then, if there was one that had, I was like, I don't want to take it that bad. So I'll just get rid of that school. And then that brings my list down a little bit.
I agree with Jacob, and actually it has been proven that if schools have the GRE, it's less probable that people of color will apply to them because that's a barrier. So I wasn't interested in being in schools like that because I knew for a fact that they were not going to be diverse or diverse. So yeah, I didn't apply for any schools that require GRE either.
Just as a matter of inside information, I would also just let you know, I wouldn't, if it does require a GRE and you're determined to go there, I would not get too stressed about your GRE results and what they mean, because the people who are doing the admissions are just like creative writing people, and we don't give a shit what your GRE score is. So like if the GRE is required, it's probably being required at the college level, at the university level. It is not being required because the creative writing program actually cares one way or the other. So like I agree with everything Lola and everyone has said, but also there's a good chance that the GRE, even if it's required, is not going to be a bar that you really have to worry about clearing terribly much.
Yes, no, this is definitely true. And if you do decide that you want to apply for one of the programs that requires a GRE, and you're like, and there is a financial hindrance for that, double check on the GRE's website before you sign up for the GRE. You have to do it beforehand, and there are fee waivers, I believe, for anybody who receives Pell Grants. So double check on that beforehand as well. So yeah, so these. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just because I did apply to schools with the GRE, I just wanted to throw it out there. What Christopher is saying is absolutely true. Like I applied to, I think, like 3 or 4 schools that required the GRE, and of those schools, only one of them actually cared about it. It was like a departmental factor that like the school itself, the grad school, required everyone to take the GRE to be eligible to be in grad school there. So it wasn't like for 3 of the 4 GREs that I took, I just like put in answers. Like I literally did not care. Because I applied 2 different years, so I took it a couple different times. But I will say for one of the schools I applied to, and I'm not going to name which one, but if you end up applying to it, you will see it because as far as I know, it's still there. So you'll know what I'm talking about if you apply, but I don't want to like do that. There was a minimum language score to get into one of the programs I applied to. But they did not care about the rest of it. So I just like bubbled in like straight A's on like the science section, and then only studied for like the lit section. And there were a lot of free GRE resources like at libraries. So there's some here. I've just looked into it for some of my own students who are applying to grad schools or thinking about grad schools. There's a ton of like free study resources online if that's something that you do want to go for. And there are fee waivers. I just didn't know about it when I was applying because no one told me about them. So if it is a school you really want to go to, there's ways to kind of mess with it to your advantage, and spend as little money as possible. So.
I'm sorry, I just want to mention that sometimes the GRE fee waivers do not include international students, so that's something important to consider.
We have another question in the chat. It's like everybody's reading my mind of the next questions that I have listed here. Asking, how many schools would you recommend applying to? They have a list of 13, but worried maybe that's too much, not enough. Do you think there's a sweet spot for the number of places to apply to?
I mean, I feel like it doesn't hurt to apply to as many places as you can, especially if you want to go to all the, like, make sure you want to like go to everywhere and you won't be disappointed if you get accepted to only one. Um, I think 13 is a fine number if you can pay for it. I only applied to 5 because I was a college senior, didn't have a lot of time or money. That's what I could afford. And yeah, I only ended up getting into UT, but that was perfectly fine. I didn't expect to get in anywhere with, you know, my personal statement. So, yeah, I think 13 is a good number if you can afford it.
Yeah, I'll say too, it's 13 sounds great. I have friends even now in the program and other friends in my undergrad who are all doing MFAs. And I heard lists from like 3 to like 20. And again, it's mostly like, do you have the time to do that? And do you have the money to do those? I did 15 and also applied during my senior year of undergraduate schools. And I basically just, for all of my classes that I was taking that last year, I front loaded all of my like essays and presentations to like the first 2 weeks of like my senior year. And so I was 90% done with all of my coursework by by week 3. And I spent the rest of my free time like working on a personal statement, working on my portfolio. Actually filling in the applications takes so much. I have spent so many hours in front, like filling in, here's my name, here's my address, here's my social security, like done so many hours of that. And so time is really a big factor to, if you can fill out that many applications, do it. The other side of this coin is that we talked about the size of programs, but still pretty much every program is really difficult to get into. A lot of programs have a couple hundred applications and then they only let in, you know, 5 people, sometimes, 13. There's some that do a bit more than that. And so they're highly competitive. And so the more applications you can send out, theoretically, the better odds you have of getting in there. But it's all about time. If you have that time and have those resources to do all those applications, then go for it.
I might add that beyond the number too is just the sort of the competitiveness of the schools, like as Jacob is alluding to here. If all 13, like if it's like only the top 13 programs that you're applying to, that might not be a great strategy. But if you're applying to, 5 that are in the top 10, and then there's some in the middle, and there's some around here that like are maybe not the greatest, but the funding is good, you'd be willing to go there. It often helps to just, the safety school thing applies as much with MFA programs as it does for just for college admissions. Just like I think from the outside, I think people don't understand how competitive these programs really are. It's very different. An MFA program is distinctly different from like those like pre-professional programs I was talking about before, where like a lot of students imagine you can just go. You sort of pay your money and you can go. But the truth is, just here at UT, we have several hundred applicants for each. We take students in poetry and prose, and we take like 1% of them. We take 2 or 3 for the 100 or 2 applicants that we have. It's a very small number, and there are some programs that are even more competitive than we are.
I will, on that note, say that I applied to 14 programs and I regret having done that. Because of those 14, there were only 5 programs that I really could see myself going to, and the others were money that I spent because I thought I needed to apply to Iowa Writers Workshop and Johns Hopkins, and like schools that I was never realistically going to get into because I just didn't. I wasn't a good fit. Like not, not that I was like a shit poet or something, but like I just wasn't a good fit. And I knew that I wasn't a good fit when I applied, but I like fell into the trap of thinking that like prestige is the same thing as a good education. And they are good education, but like that doesn't mean that like a small school in rural somewhere is not a good education. Like it depends on who is there, I think. So I regret applying to 14. That's a lot of money I could have saved myself. I took out a small loan to pay for those. As a grad student, because like I said, I did it twice. I applied to MAs first, and so I was a grad student making like no money, and I spent like almost $1,000 on applications. That's like a whole month's paycheck for me at that time. So I took out a loan, and I regret that because then you earn interest on loans, and I spent a long time paying off applications for schools that I didn't even really want to go to. I just kind of fell into that trap of like, I have to apply to the Iowa Writers Workshop. I have to apply to like, Brown or whatever. And you don't. And I wouldn't have wanted to live in the Northeast. I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, so applying to fewer schools, if I could go back and do it again, I would apply to fewer schools and only just like work really, really hard on the applications of the places that I wanted to be at, versus like trying to like throw caution to the wind. And if you have 14 schools, I think that's okay if you can afford it. I don't recommend taking out a loan to do it unless you feel very confident that you can pay it back quickly and not earn interest. But I could not. So I will serve as a cautionary tale, I think. And I ended up going to one of the 5 that I should have just of the 2 that I got into, they were both in the 5 that I wanted to go to. So I just should have saved my money.
I think 13 is a good number. I applied only to 5 because, again, it was more expensive to me, and that's all the money that I had for applying. And I do agree with Chris, and something that I want to say is that there are no MFA safety schools. Like I think that in the MFA draft, a lot of times people mention like smaller programs or programs that are not that popular as a safety school. When you're looking for a fully funded program, that doesn't exist. Like, yeah, like UT, only 5 people get in. And I know that people have considered UT a safety school in the past, and it's really not. So yeah, I agree with like maybe applying to some that are very popular, some that are not, but thinking about the fact that none of these schools are safety schools, especially if they are fully funded.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a very good point. Like the fully funded programs are they're so competitive that that there's no such thing. But I love that Raye said like you do not have to apply to Iowa, and that is absolutely true. You do not have to start at the top schools just because they're the top schools. And in fact, like there's a lot to be said for not applying to the top schools. Like those are spaces that are, it can make you feel really good when you get in, but they also are the most competitive programs, not just to get in, but once you're in. And the environment there is not necessarily what everyone is looking for. Like, for some people, certainly it is, but for a lot of writers, it's not a super great space. But the other thing I want to say too is that like, and this gets back to like Lola's like safety school thing. Like the other reason that there's no real safety school too is that it's such a shot in the dark. Like that it is, all things related to art is completely random and a chance. It's like it is making a love connection blindfolded. You don't know who's going to be reading your material at any given school, and you just you don't know where you're going to find the people who love what you're doing. And so in some ways, that also makes it harder to think about like where to apply in some ways, but it's I think it's just an important thing to have in mind throughout the whole process of trying to be a writer in any sense. It's going to be true when you submit things to journals and editors like throughout your life, is that it's hard to you can't predict where the people who are going to get you and get your work are going to be. So it's an important place, I think, as Raye was saying, is like think about where you would like to be and where people that you are interested in are. The people that you are interested in are more likely to be the people who are interested in you. And so it's a real argument in favor of familiarizing yourself with the work of the people who teach there, because those are the people who are making the decisions about who gets in. And, like what I said, like if you like their work, there's a, somewhat better chance that they're going to respond to yours as well. But it's also just at the end of the day, it's like, it's just hard to predict. There's no objective measure of greatness that like the schools use. It's very subjective. It's like, do I like this? Is this someone I want to work with? Is this material that I think is really exciting? And it's hard to know where that connection is going to happen.
Go ahead, Shira.
I was just going to say on that note, like the kind of when you're in a program, it's easy to kind of think about the program's flaws and think about like other programs. But something that I think I have learned, like making friends with people at other programs throughout my time, is that every program has its own like distinct flaws. And no program is going to be absolutely perfect. It's easy to kind of catastrophize, once you're there. But I think that compared to other flaws that other programs have that I've been hearing about, the ones that our program does, genuinely, I think we got off very easy in certain ways. So, like, it's easy to give into the kind of doom and gloom, being like, oh my God, this isn't perfect. Like, this amazing poet that I've wanted to work with, as a human being. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but just like nothing is going to be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like there's a sense that there's like the perfect fit, but we fit in a lot of different places, and a lot of the things that there are a lot of different places that we can fit as well. So casting, I think, a wide net is a good idea generally. So we have talked a lot about kind of research and kind of what this process looks like up until the point of actually doing the applying. So I want to talk a little bit about the materials that you need in an application portfolio. So when you're applying to an MFA, I'm gonna start, Chris, with this question, since you can be kind of behind the scenes on this. What is the most important document in your portfolio or in the application process?
The creative sample, this like period. It's just really the creative sample. When I'm reading applications, I start at the I'm not everyone necessarily does it, but this is me personally. Like certainly the creative sample for everyone is the most important, but for me, it's where I start and then I circle back. Like if I'm blown away by the creative sample, then I go back and I read the other stuff. But if I'm not necessarily going to go and read the personal statement, which is maybe unfair in some ways, but we have hundreds of these to get through. And what we're looking for is just like the stuff that sparks things. And like, whoa, this is unexpected and really interesting. And yeah, so like, my biggest piece of advice is just like that creative sample is where you really need to shine and really put your energy, like make that really show who you are as an artist, and put your money in that.
Yeah, opening the question up kind of larger, what are I'll just kind of note, traditionally most applications require a creative sample, and that's going to be a certain number of pages of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, usually not a combo of the two. You are usually applying in one genre. And then a personal statement, perhaps a CV, and occasionally some other kind of like a teaching statement or some other kind of statements that are specific to the position. Is there anything I'm forgetting? So that's the basic kind of application portfolio. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Lola.
No, I was just gonna say TOEFL, if you're an international student, like it is required for all the schools that I apply to, even schools that the program may be in Spanish. Since you are gonna be teaching in English, the TOEFL is required for all international students. Sorry.
No, thank you. That's yeah.
The transcripts, and this can be another thing that trips up international students, I think, a lot too, is that sometimes you need to be aware of the requirements of the various programs. And like for us, there's a certain number of credit hours that you need to have in upper level English classes in order to qualify. And if you weren't an English major, that can sometimes be hard. Or if you like were in like a professional program somewhere else and just didn't have the kind of classes that easily port, can be an issue. But yeah, a transcript is going to be a piece of it.
Yeah, so in thinking about these documents, yes, I think every time I have talked with anybody, it is always the creative sample is most important. And to really, are there any tips and tricks for any of these documents? Things that you recommend, maybe in terms of thinking about ordering, how many pieces you put in, what a personal statement should, might look like. And this can be from your own experience or maybe experience that you've had previously. Or sorry, but maybe let me rephrase. Maybe from advice that you have been given as well.
Yeah, for sure. The strongest work you have for the portfolio, the writing sample, is where you should be going. I think there was a comment about different rounds and deciding which poems to use. Best poems, hands down, every single time. Whatever you think is your best work, that's what you should be displaying. And there's even like a bit of a political game you got to play with yourself, where there are some things where you think, okay, I think this poem is my greatest stuff. I like it. I think it's really great. It's a little bit denser. It's a little bit stranger. It might not always be everyone's cup of tea, but this other poem is like really sick, and everyone who's read it, really, jives with it. There might be some like decision of, do I want to go out on this like creative limb and show the leaps and bounds I'm able to do as an artist, or do I want to show something that, more people can agree, like this is like really cool. Like personally, that goes down to order of a portfolio. I can't remember what UTK's like page limits are, but I think I was able to put in like one short story and some of another short story, or like one short story and a quick like flash fiction 2-page short story. And so I was able to try to do both that way. If you can do both, absolutely show one that's like, hey, here's a more like traditional understanding of a short story, and then here is this wacky auto fiction like that can show like I can do like multiple things, whatever. So absolutely display your best work, but also be thinking about work that shows off your, your skills as an artist, that you can do a lot of different ideas and a lot of in a shorter, more constrained format.
I think I'm going to give advice about personal statements, even though I'm like really struggle with them personally, because I feel like it's really hard to describe my own work and I get really overwhelmed trying to do it. Really good advice I received is that committees are reading these to get a sense of like you as a person and not just as an artist. They want to make sure that you're not going to be like toxic in the program and mesh well with the other writers. So just make sure, you're not coming across as someone who either won't engage or, isn't interested in forming a community, or, helping other writers in your community. I also think like you can go a bunch of different routes with them, like personal narrative style or like just general kind of plans if you're more like research oriented. But there's not like a formula. It's not like a college essay, like it's not like a formula that you can kind of, I don't know, draw from examples, unfortunately.
I think for me, I think we were asked to do like 15 poems and something that, or 10 poems, 10 to 15 poems. And something that I was told is that I should put what I thought was my best poem first and my second best as the last one. So that's what I did, and it worked. And I passed the first round, and I uploaded that same sample of work in my second one. Like I didn't change anything. I just uploaded the same one, and it worked. And yeah, the personal statement I think was also very important for me, because when I was called and they told me that they accepted me, Ileana did tell me that she really liked my personal statement, and it was very much about who I am as a person and how that is connected to my work. So I agree, like talking about yourself and like, what you plan to do, and not only about what you can get out of the program, but what you can give the program. I think that's also something that's very important to mention in your personal statement.
Yeah, I'll just go off of what everyone else has just said. I think the best advice I got about a personal statement was my first personal statement that I wrote. My advisor was like, "This is a manifesto, start over." And I said, "Okay." But the advice that she gave me was less manifesto and more write, why would they want to sit down and have coffee with you? Like, who are you as a person? Like, that's exactly how she phrased it. She's like, what about you would you like them to know? What would make them want to just like hang out with you as a person? And like still include like the thing, like, you know, your publications and like things that you want to do and your goals and stuff like that. But once I started like front loading that, like, here's who I am, like here's what I'm interested in, here's what I would like to talk about, like that kind of thing, but like letting it be a personal thing, like an actual personal statement, I started actually getting like advancing through rounds. So less manifesto, more why would I want to have a coffee with this person?
And I would also say like less art object. Like we get a lot of statements of purpose that are just like beautifully polished and sculpted and imagistic, but what they don't really have is a clear sense of who the person is. And as I think everyone at this point has said, like that's we're just trying to figure out who you are and what kind of person you'll be. And something that's just like really cloaked in, you know, like beautiful lines is not necessarily going to give us a sense of what that is. And so it's not necessarily helping. So yeah, like I just like take all that poetry and put it into the creative sample and just like allow the creative, the personal statement to be a place where you are just honest, and talk about who you are and what you're about. And as everyone has said, like what you contribute, what you want to get out of this, you know, like give a sense so that like, you know, what this is. And like what a program has to, what opportunity the program is providing you. For the creative sample, you know, be to some extent like it does help like when you're doing your research about the programs to know what kind of program it is and the kind of work they're looking for. I can't emphasize like how much I read the prose samples, how much fantasy fiction I get when people are applying. And you know, there are MFA programs that are open to young adult fiction and to different kinds of genre fiction, but most traditional MFA programs, like the only genre they're really interested in is literary fiction. That certainly can have elements of other genre stuff in it, but know that. You know, if you're between like the decision of like, you know, on the prose side, you know, if you're trying to choose between like a story versus a chapter, you know, like yes, like your best writing generally gets priority, but we sometimes are also looking for a sense that like you understand narrative. And so something with a beginning and a middle and an end can really help with an application over something that's just like all beginning or all middle. It's just like a chunk of something. I can speak with much less authority about poetry since I don't actually read those, but I think that's been well covered.
Yeah, and then going back to personal statements really quick, like the best pieces of advice I was given were show them that you don't want to burn the program down and just show them that you're chill and that you want to get along with people, and show them that you love being an artist, that you love writing. I had one professor put it like, I was reading this one personal statement and they kept going on and on about how like their fish died and how writing a short story helped them understand the fish's life. And by the time I finished it, I didn't understand if they even liked writing it. And I didn't understand like why they wanted to be a writer. And so things like that, I think what was said about the sort of removing the poetics of the personal statement is really important. And it's difficult, especially for writers, to look at a sentence and be like, oh, this is too factual. I have to put an allusion to something in here. But fight that urge, and I really just try to show I'm a person who loves to write and want to keep writing, and I would love to do that at your program. And like a tool that I used was whenever I had like a rough outline of like maybe a page of what a personal statement would look like, and then would add half a page of individualized um, context and intersperse that throughout it. And so I'd be like, hey, I'd love to come to Knoxville, Tennessee. I would love to participate in the Chiasmus reading series, and just throwing things like that they have on the website. A lot of schools will say, we have these reading series. We have this series where we invite writers. Tell them that you want to go to this series. Tell them that you want to read in front of people. Tell them that you want to interact with the undergraduate students. Like all of those elements, regardless of if like you genuinely it's your deepest conviction to go and to talk to undergraduates, showing that you're still interested, that that's something you would do if the opportunity presented itself, is extremely valuable and something I would recommend everyone do. Put in some very individualized elements and show that you know what the school's about, what the school stands for, the programs that they put up. It will make them see, oh wow, they actually looked at our website and read it and know what we're about, and extremely valuable stuff.
Uh, Thank you all so much. I have more questions, but I know we are running out of time, and I want to make sure we do have time for questions from folks who are here. So if anybody would like to step in and ask any questions of anything that we did not cover, now is the time to do so. All right, we will end just if we could briefly just I would love to end with one piece of advice that or one thing that you wish you had known when you were applying.
I really wish I'd known about the Facebook groups. I think the like largest anxiety for me was submitting it and then not knowing when they had read it or when people found out that they got accepted or rejected or waitlisted. And so I didn't learn about this Facebook group until after I got to Knoxville and heard that other people in my cohort had been using it. I was like, oh, that would have been very helpful to know to the general timeline. So that's a very useful resource.
I would just say if you don't get in, that's okay. Like these programs are so competitive. People who get in on the first round are usually an anomaly. It's like unless you apply to like a ton of programs. But there's no shame in trying again. It happens. Like it's okay.
As international students, we do not have access to as many resources as other people have, but we do have a community of people who help with that. So in the MFA draft, there is a special page for MFA international students where we help each other because there are many things that we didn't talk about here, but for example, the documents that you have to turn in your graduate application, you have to translate, but also you have to pay for those translations to be official. So it's just a ton of things that make it not accessible for international students. And even when that is happening, there's people that like me and some of my friends at UT who were in the MFA before that try to help other international students to come here because we do want international students to keep coming. So just know that it seems like we don't have the same resources as people from the US. And if you don't get in being an international student, like it's completely understandable, but also know that there are people willing to help.
I will just quickly throw out there something sort of related to what Shira said about, if you don't get in, it's not because you're a bad writer. It's just kind of the way there's so few spots for so many good writers. Similarly to that, a waitlist is a compliment, not a bad thing. And I say this as someone who I got into UT Austin off of the waitlist. And I let that really hurt me for a long time. When I was going through that program, I felt like I had something to prove because of it. But yeah, so Shira, yeah, a wait list is a compliment. Like it's it can be something so simple that makes you the next one down. Like so incredibly simple. My advisor at UT Austin, I keep saying Austin because it's a different UT. My advisor at UT Austin was like, yeah, you had a typo in the first line of your statement. And that like once you get to that level, it's such a minuscule difference that like you have to like, they have to start making hard choices. And so yeah, just don't a waitlist is a compliment, not a gut punch. It feels bad sometimes, but it's a good thing. Especially if like the school only accepts like 3 people, like four place is great in that case. And also people who get in often have gotten into more than one place and will often go somewhere else. And Shira and I are like, I guess, examples that it does happen. And you can get off a wait list and go to like your dream school. So
thank you all so much for your time today. I really appreciate you and your insights and all of the knowledge that you were able to share with everyone today. Thank you so much for your time. If any folks in the audience want to stick around, have any follow-up questions, would like to chat, I am happy to do so. Anybody else, I also want to be respectful of your time. So feel free, go eat food, enjoy your evening, and thank you all so much. I do want a quick note. If you are interested, for those of you in attendance, interested in careers in publishing, there is another roundtable next week on Wednesday from 5 to 6 with some local publishers as well as alumni who are working in publishing. So if you'd like to be a part of that, I dropped the link to that event in the chat as well. I'm also happy to, in the career services hours, happy to chat with y'all about your personal statements, about your portfolios, anything along those lines. I'm also happy to help you research programs. So my information's on the internet under career development, but I'm also happy to give you that info if you'd like it afterwards. So thank you all.